as a dividing line between those who stand in defense of Zionism and imperialism and those who fight for the dismantling, the struggle for the liberation of Palestine has entered a new phase. The brokering of the ceasefire agreement has been defined by the rush of the imperialists to divide among them the spoils of war. Imperialist plans for Gaza are openly being discussed, with the Tony Blair Institute drafting a so-called development plan for Gaza, the Labour government inviting private firms to compete for Gaza reconstruction contracts. The British imperialists are preparing the terrain for continued oppression, plundering, and Zionist expansion. They are setting up the conditions for 100 more years of British imperialism in the Middle East. It is paramount now for the British state to discredit liberation movements and resistance organizations, which it has been doing for years with the Terrorism Act 2000. Slogans like globalize or victory to the Intifada or from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, have been branded as anti-Semitic. Our solidarity must be with the Palestinians fighting for their liberation, who have refused to lay down their arms despite pressure from the imperialists. We know the only shape peace can take is that of a unitary and secular Palestinian state in which people of all creeds and all origins can live in peace. Over the past 2 years of genocide, the Solidarity movement has radicalized itself in parallel to mounting repression. The state's continued complicity in Zionist genocide has shattered illusions in the Labour Party and traditional establishment politics. Young people are increasingly political and intuitively tying the Palestinian struggle to other anti-imperialist struggles around the world, and to state racism at home, and to a general crisis of the capitalist system. And now these same people are seeing right through imperialist lies and deceit about their planned reconstruction of Gaza. The British ruling class cannot allow this to continue. A victory for the Palestinian resistance implies a necessary end to British economic, political, and military interests in the Middle East. It closes the way towards a colonial takeover of the Gaza Strip. This is why the Labour government continues to support the Zionist state, why even despite party membership backing a motion in support of the UN assessment that Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza, they have continued to deny this blatant fact. The logical end of the building of a principled, mass, anti-imperialist movement in Britain is the crushing of British imperialism and state racism. As such, the ruling class arms itself with a number of weapons to stamp out and fragment anti-imperialist resistance wherever it arises. Since the 7th of October, several thousands of people have been arrested in Britain for their solidarity with Palestine, from breaches of the peace, to racially aggravated public order offenses, to incitement to racial hatred, to terrorism offenses. The institutions of the state have used every single one of the tools at their disposal to police, control, and defang the mobilizations happening in the streets. The Terrorism Act 2000 in particular has become their weapon of choice. It is this act which made the Ban on Palestine action possible, which made the arrests of thousands and thousands of people challenging the ban possible. But the prescription of Palestine action is not an error, nor a misuse of the act itself. Far from it. It is part of the basic design of terror legislation, which the RCG has consistently opposed since its first introduction. Terrorism legislation first came into existence in Britain in the form of the PTA, the Prevention of Terrorism Act. The PTA was introduced in 1974 by the then Labour government in the context of the civil rights movement and armed Republican struggle in the occupied 6 counties of Ireland. What the PTA did, more so than fight extremist violence, was stifle any support for the Irish liberation struggle by providing a climate for intimidation, harassment, false arrest, manufactured confessions, and the brutal treatment of prisoners. Every year, for 26 years, the PTA was voted on in the Commons, and every year it was judged necessary. The introduction of the Terrorism Act 2000 under a Blair-led Labour government made the powers introduced by the PTA permanent and further expanded these. As such, it was no longer the Irish and their liberation organizations who were repressed, but anyone action. Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act 2000 makes legal the detainment of persons at international borders and airports. Under Schedule 7, no comment interviews are illegal. Police can seize your devices and force you to unlock them, and you can be detained for up to 6 hours, all of which does not necessitate having been arrested prior to detention, search, or questioning. Earlier this year, Fahad Ansari, one of the lawyers who worked on the application to deprescribe Hamas and a vocal supporter of the Palestinian resistance, was detained and had his devices seized under Schedule 7. Ansari has successfully requested a judicial review of the decision to detain him. Even lawyers and journalists, respected professionals, which operate squarely within existing legal frameworks, have been subject to harassment and intimidation by the police under the Terrorism Act 2000. The designation of anti-imperialist resistance as terrorism serves to politically delegitimize what is righteous struggle legal under international law. The Palestinians are not simply passive victims. They are the protagonists in their struggle for freedom. And as anti-imperialists, our goal is to uphold their right to self-determination down to an uprising or war, in the words of Lenin. The RCG has been particularly active in resisting state repression, especially through the SARS 2 defense campaign. The SARS 2 are 2 students, including myself, supporters of the RCG, who have been arrested under Section 12 of the Terrorism Act for speeches expressing principled support for the Palestinian liberation struggle and the right to armed resistance against occupation. Both myself and my comrade, as was said, each face a potential 14 years of prison time. We have had our homes raided, our devices seized, and our passports confiscated. The SARS 2 defense campaign has mobilized broad support from the Palestine solidarity movement and protested outside the courts at every hearing. We do this not simply to defend myself and my comrade as individuals, but because every arrest is an attack on Palestine solidarity, and every conviction represents an important setback for our ability to organize. If I am convicted, it would have serious implications for the movement in support of Palestine here in Britain. It would mean that anyone who expresses support for the Palestinians' right to resist could be tried under the Terrorism Act. It is in the interest of every single person and organization which stands in defense of Palestine to also stand in defense of those who are being criminalized for their solidarity. There are many more people other than myself who are currently on bail awaiting trial, or on bail after having been arrested, or under the murky status of release under investigation, which is what the police put you under when they can no longer legally keep you on bail, but want to keep you under their boot. The RUI status does not have any statute limits and can last for years. The Filton 24 are 24 activists currently remanded to prison for their involvement in actions to shut down Melbit Systems factory in Filton, near Bristol. The first ones to have been arrested and remanded have now been in prison for over a year, without having been found guilty of a single crime. Earlier this year, evidence was released which revealed that the Israeli embassy had been actively interfering in the case. Following the prescription of Palestine Action in July of this year, the detention conditions of the Filton 24 worsened, prompting one of the detainees, Tuta Haqsa, to go on a successful hunger strike, and after a month of pressure from within and without the prison Haqsa's prison demands were finally met. The RCG has been in regular contact with the Filton 24 activists and other political prisoners. Their letters have been published in the Prisoners Fight Back page of our newspaper, Fight Racism, Fight Imperialism. The experience of imprisonment for many activists has awakened them to the brutality of the British prison system and the social function it fulfills. As ex-political prisoner Francesca Nadine remarks in her letter to FRFI, all those she was incarcerated with were, like her, political prisoners, targeted because they were poor, because they were immigrants, because they were black. We are seeing attempts to strengthen solidarity among prisoners with organizations such as Prisoners for Palestine. Activists sent to prison must use the opportunity to deepen the political consciousness of their fellow detainees and re-establish prisons as a prominent site of popular struggle. A political prosecution requires a political defense within and without the courtroom. We know the courts are far from a neutral political space. The building of the Old Bailey was inaugurated in 1907 at the height of the British colonial empire. Its great halls remain soaked in the blood of the victims of British colonialism. The whole of the justice system and laws as they exist today were set up in the first instance to protect the right to private property. Every collective right, like the right to protest or the right to strike, was won as a result of popular struggle. Such is the same for international law, in which occupied people's right to armed resistance was only included after the victory of colonized peoples over the colonial oppressors in Algeria, in Vietnam, in Kenya, in Haiti, and elsewhere. Similarly, we will have to fight to defend our right to defend Palestine, to give the British state no other choice but to concede to our demands. We must use every tool at our disposal to speak out against the wretched, imperialist British state, and we must force every judge and every public prosecutor to face the consequences of upholding Zionism and imperialism. This requires for us to come out en masse to support our comrades at police stations, at courts, and at prisons. We need to be more numerous, better organized, and better disciplined than the police, the CPS, and the prison officers. Our movement must be militant, politically educated and principled, and most importantly, ready to fight and ready to win. Our demands must resonate loud and clear in every courtroom across the country until the last charge is dropped, until the last prisoner